is your thing anyway? Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Lori, and it's Thursday, which means that it's time to talk about life and career goals and how to get ish done. Today, I want to talk about choosing your life and career goals because that's usually the first and the most difficult part. When people ask us as kids what we want to be when we grow up, it's kind of a trick question because one, when we're kids, we only know like 5 jobs, aka mom, dad, pizza guy, firefighter, and teacher. And 2, we don't know what any of those jobs actually entails. To be totally honest, this doesn't just apply to kids because I was reading the news this week and NASA was saying that 18,300 people applied to be an astronaut, which is like the most people who've ever applied in history. And even though I have taken a mild interest in space, I've read The Martian, I've watched Interstellar, I have no freaking idea what it takes to be an astronaut. Anyway, this is all just to say that I don't think it's fair to expect people to know whether they're 15 or 25 or 35 what they want to do with their lives if they don't even really know what they like to do. What I know now though as a working professional is that it comes at different times for different people, but we all surprise ourselves when we figure out what it is that gets us excited. It usually isn't about a specific label or a job title, it's more about, are you a loner or do you like working with people? Do you like sitting in front of a computer or do you like going outside? Some of us may decide that we don't like anything except designer bags and nice cars, so we don't really care what we do except that we make enough money to do those things. And that's a totally legitimate life pursuit if that's your thing. And that brings me back to the original question of the day, which is, what is your thing anyway? If you don't know the answer right now, it's totally okay, because the idea that you have to decide what you want to be before you decide if you like it is totally backwards. I will say this, resist the temptation to blow off thinking about it at all, because if you're like me, you might have limited resources to start off with, and that means that you're going to have to put in a lot more time and a lot more effort to get to where you need to go. Goals are a really nice place to start, and you should aim high. But figuring out what you're truly passionate about just requires a lot of research, trial, error, and time. Let's look back at astronauts, because you know your girl wasn't going to bring that up without actually looking into it, right? Astronauts, at least in my opinion, are some of the most elite, coolest people on Earth. There are only several hundred human beings who've ever been to outer space in all of history. You might think that that makes it impossible to be an astronaut. And as it turns out, if you don't have 20/20 vision, it is, so I can't be an astronaut. But if you do have perfect vision and you like science a lot, NASA actually does publish a list of requirements that it has for astronaut applications, and it's not as long as you might think. You have to have professional piloting or teaching experience or a higher degree in math or science, and I think there's some physical requirements too. You guys can look it up. None of these things are impossible. In fact, plenty of people do them. It's just harder depending on where you are, who you are, and how much money you have. Obviously though, even when you do satisfy all the requirements, there is still a slim chance of you becoming an astronaut because they just don't pick that many of them. I'm not bringing this up to discourage anyone. It's just a perfect example of how an early start and research can come in really handy. If you decide what you want to do and you start early enough, there are ways to get money to get the education you need to do something like that. And I can address that in a future video about education and financing. I'm also bringing it up because it's one of those really high ambitious career goals that most people are just never going to make because they only pick less than 10 people per class. But there are lots and lots of jobs at NASA supporting space exploration that aren't actually being an astronaut. There are people who build and fix equipment. There are even people who help astronauts get dressed. That's a thing. There are people who work in accounting, marketing, and education. There are people who work in the commercial space industry now, and all of this is vital to what NASA does. But you may never hear about these jobs or figure out that you might be qualified to do them if you don't figure out that you might like space first. This really goes for any profession. You might love music and you might want to be a pop star or a musician, and it'll be really hard to make it as one of those things. But there are many ways that you can work within that industry that you feel so passionately about. You could be a sound engineer, you could be a publicist or a songwriter or an entertainment lawyer. If you want a career in politics, you might want to try being an elected official, but if you fall short of that, you can also work for a campaign or join an organization for a cause that you really believe in. Personally, when I was coming up, there were a lot of things that I never even considered because they were just out of the realm of possibility. I was still an ambitious kid though, and even then I had teachers and relatives telling me that I wasn't practical or the things that I wanted to do were too hard. Those people meant well, and some of them were right about a lot of things, but most of them were wrong. I not only went to a college that a guidance counselor didn't think I could get into, but I got a scholarship that paid for most of my tuition. I got a job that allowed me to be creative, to travel all around the world, and to pay my bills. I did have a lot of disadvantages trying to make it to that point. Like, I did have to work several jobs at the same time for a few years, and I didn't have all the connections that I needed. But I made it and I survived through that time, and I managed to make enough connections connections along the way. As you get started on your journey, I should note one more thing, and that is, whether you know it yet or not, there is one more barrier besides lack of money and besides lack of connections that can be really hard to overcome. And that is the block or the glass ceiling or whatever you want to call it if you're of a demographic that's undesirable in your field. If you're a woman, you might have a little trouble getting funding for your tech startup, or if you're a minority actor, you might have trouble getting a leading role in a Hollywood film. In all likelihood, you may not overcome those barriers in your lifetime, but I think you should try to get as close as possible anyway, because one, you never know how close you're gonna get unless you try. And let's face it, it wasn't that long ago that it was unthinkable that an Indian American actor could have his own TV show, or that we would have a black president. And also, like I was just saying before, for every crazy, high, ambitious job that's really difficult to get, there's a dozen jobs adjacent to it that are just as cool and awesome that you may have never heard of. I'm telling you guys all this now, and I'm making all these videos on my channel because I wouldn't have known any of it if it weren't for the fact that I got lucky and had a mother who was like the queen of hustle and told me early and often that life wasn't fair and I was gonna have to fight like right away in order to get what I wanted down the line. Believe me, in my house, this was like a mantra. I was also extremely lucky along the way to meet a handful of people who really encouraged me and guided me. Sometimes all it took was just hearing one story or meeting one person who said one thing, and that was enough to take me off the wrong path and put me on the right one. So I'm just trying to pay it forward. If any of you guys out there are in the middle of trying to decide what you want to do, or maybe doing something already and thinking about changing, share your story in the comments. Or if you've already been through it and you might have some tips to share, let us know what worked for you. That's all we have time for today, guys. Subscribe below if you want to see more videos like this every Thursday, and click the thumbs up if you like what you see. I also do videos on Wednesdays and Fridays on different topics, and I do a podcast every month, which I'll link down below. Bye!